Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oaks Show this week. Glad to have you with us. And we have had an exciting week here at the Mighty Oaks Foundation. A lot of good things going on. And after a long period of layoff with our in-person sessions where we serve veterans and active duty service members, we're back at it, and our team has been working hard and really excited about all that is happening. But excited to have you with us today as well as we introduce, hopefully, to you a new guest, someone that you will follow, someone that is very much simpatico with the Mighty Oaks Foundation and what we do and many of our goals, and excited to share this time with you. But before we jump into the conversation, as I do every week, if you have not yet subscribed on YouTube, please do that. Go to our channel, and you may be watching this in a number of places, but if you are not on our Mighty Oaks YouTube channel, please go over there, check out the channel. So much content. This show, of course, is there, but just about every day we're putting new content out, and that's designed to help you, and would love to get that out to you. So subscribe if you have not. Hit the notification bell. That lets you know when more content comes online, and we'll continue to stay in touch, share this out, comment, let us know what you want to hear about, and we'll do our best to accommodate, but glad to serve you. Today, our guest is, first of all, introduce you to someone who's familiar, not a guest, Chad Robichaux. Chad is not always with us. Today he is. Last 2 weeks ago, Chad was in studio, which was awesome. Today he is hiding out in his bunker somewhere in the hills of Arizona. So it's good to have Chad here. And our special guest today is retired Navy SEAL Jason Redman. And Jason is coming to us remotely as well, but glad that he could be with us. Jason is got incredible stories, written the book, The Trident, the forging and reforging of a Navy SEAL leader. And he'll talk about that today and tell his story. But guys, thanks for joining us. We've been trying to do this one for a couple weeks and finally landed on it. So appreciate both of you taking the time to talk. Jason, man, why don't we just jump in? Tell us your story. I love to hear about how people end up in the military. It's always funny to me when you talk to civilians, people who have not been in the military. They always assume that the only reason you go into the military is either because your parents were in the military, a grandparent was in the military, or you had nothing else to do with your life. Those are the only three categories, right? And it's always so much more than that. Tell us where you came from, where you grew up, and how you ended up in the Navy.
Jeremy, well, first off, thanks for having me on. Big shout out to the Mighty Oaks Foundation for everything you guys are doing to give back to veterans, for your service as a Marine, and Chad for your service also, man, honored to be on. So yeah, parents were in the military. I had nothing else to do with my life. I had nowhere else to go, so I joined it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, so you became a SEAL. You did the easy route.
So no, but there is truth though. I did come from a military family. So where am I from? I was born in the great state of Ohio. And go Bucks. But I left there at a young age. Parents divorced when I was very young, and just started a journey that a lot of young kids can empathize with. You know, that whole bouncing back and forth between mom and dad over the years. The good news is it taught me to be flexible and resilient as a kid, because I bounced up and down the East Coast, Ohio to North Carolina to South Carolina, brief stint in Georgia, Florida, lived in the Virgin Islands for a while, which gave me a great appreciation for the water, and grew up with a very strong patriotic mindset and family. You know, stories. My dad was ex-Army. He was an Army paratrooper and rigger. So I grew up with these really cool stories, and I remember looking at the pictures of my dad jumping out of airplanes. I mean, I had his old Army jackets. He actually had an old DRMO'd parachute, which for those that don't know, DRMO is like the place where we get rid of military gear. And he had an old parachute that had been DRMO'd, and he got it. And I used to play with it when I was a kid, man. I'd put on the rigging, and I was just like, this is amazing. Someday I'm going to jump out of airplanes. And listen to this.
Marine called the RMO supply.
Yeah.
we get the Navy's dermo and use it for our everyday wear.
Yeah. You know, you could actually find some good stuff in dermo. You know, I've been dermo shopping before back in the day. So before 9/11, when we weren't operating out of the Golden Connex box.
Yeah.
But you know, just grew up with these amazing stories of military individuals in my family. My grandfather was a decorated World War II pilot. He flew a B-24 in the European theater, flew all of his missions and then some. He actually, his plane got shot down, and they weren't able to bail out. And thankfully it was in the winter over, they were launching out of Italy, and there was in the winter, and they crash landed in Yugoslavia. He literally landed in a snow-covered field, and everybody survived. And they got out and they evaded their way back to friendly lines.
Wow.
And he got the Distinguished Flying Cross for that, and then numerous air medals. So fascinated with that. My great uncle was shot down in the Pacific. My dad was in the Army. So I grew up, and that's all I ever wanted to do. You know, my dad told me about the SEAL teams when I was about 14, or at least about the SEALs. And trust me, I am about the most unlikely candidate, you know, especially back then. I mean, when I was 14 years old, I was literally the 95-pound weakling. I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'8" and about 170 pounds. And when I was 14, I literally was probably 5 feet, if that, and 90 pounds, soaking wet. And I don't know what it is. It lit a fire in me. I was not a big athlete or anything. I like to play outdoors. I like to do stuff like that. I was fascinated with G.I. Joe when I was a kid in the military, but I definitely did not have the traits that most people would think of that would become a Navy SEAL. And as a matter of fact, I mean, when I told people about it, they laughed their face off at me. But it just, there was something in me that clicked. And I said, that's what I want to do. I had done a lot of swimming when I was in the Virgin Islands, so I knew I was very comfortable in the water. And I just focused on, hey, man, if I'm going to do this, I got to start working out. I got to start figuring things out. I went out for the football team. I started wrestling, and I just started working out all the time, and basically got to where I did well on the SEAL screening test and earned a slot to go to BUD/S. You know, joined the Navy when I was 17, still in high school, and as soon as I graduated, headed to boot camp.
Yeah, man, what an awesome story. You went into the military, and September 13th, 2007, you were doing an operation in Iraq, and you know, talk about. I could tell a story, but you could tell it better than I can. So, tell us about that story. Tell us about what happened on that day.
Yeah, and you guys may be familiar with the area. The Marines owned the battle space in the Al Anbar province in 2007.
Yeah.
The second MU, or the second the group out of Camp Lejeune. I'm totally blanking right now. But basically, we were the special operations component for Al Anbar. So we went after high-level and mid-level targets throughout the Al Anbar province. And there, you know, Fallujah was still a pretty dangerous place, although we had pushed a lot of the insurgency in the heart of Al-Qaeda up to the northeast, outside of Fallujah, into an area known as Karma. And I don't know if either of you guys have ever been to Karma. A lot of the Marines were in the outposts there. An incredibly dangerous place. I know a lot of Marines were killed, a ton of IEDs. And our very first mission of that deployment, we went after the #1 leader for the Anbar province and got into a huge firefight. I wasn't actually on this mission yet. We were still doing turnover, but kind of half of our team, half of the oncoming team. And right off the bat, you know, very first mission, one of our guys was wounded. We lost a SEAL, Petty Officer Clark Swedler. Another SEAL was severely wounded, and one of our Iraqis was killed on that mission. And it kind of just started this momentum for the entire deployment of, we're going to get this guy. And we hunted this guy throughout the entire deployment. Every time we went into Karma, and that became our focus while we were there. Every time we went in there, we got into firefights, which, fast forward to the end of the deployment, September 13th, 1 week before going home, we had missed this guy. We just could not find him. We couldn't get a specific time and location he was going to be. So September 12th, we got word, hey, the guy you've been looking for is going to be in a specific place in Karma. And it was a place we knew well. We had gotten into several firefights. It was in a place that normally you're not allowed to go, and I'll just leave it at that. So I really didn't think that mission was going to be approved just because of some of those reasons, but it went all the way up to the top, and we got the green light about 11 p.m. We had already been doing mission planning, but allowed us pretty quick turn. We launched about 1 a.m. and I was fortunate enough to be the assault force commander for the actual target takedown. Came in, took the target down, and nothing was there. We could tell we had just missed somebody. There was activity. You know, you could see remnants of people having recently been there, but it was actually empty. But we did start finding all kinds of explosives. We found IED making components. So basically we wrapped all that stuff up and we were going to blow it up. And then we thought that was going to be it. We thought it was going to be a quiet night. And unfortunately we thought we had missed that guy again. So probably about 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m., our snipers called down and said, hey man, we got a whole bunch of activity on another house about 150 yards away. We just watched about 5 individuals run out the front door across the street into some vegetation, and they appear to be hiding in the vegetation. So my boss came up to me and said, hey man, let's go wrap these guys up. 3 a.m. after we flew in on helicopters and they're running away, usually that's a sign they're not good people. So took my team and maneuvered up from the south to the north, and basically, long story short, walked into a very well executed ambush. Our leader had left the position that we were in, went to that house to the north, and that was his bed down location for the night, and had a very robust security element, which we had been warned if we got too close wore suicide vests. And the last 5 guys were the last part of his security detail. And there was a road that ran up from the house we were in and ran in front of that house where he was. And then there was a field across the street, and there was vegetation, this vegetated field in between. And I think what they believed is we were either going to drive up to that house or we were going to land our helicopters, because what we didn't know is the last part of that, those 5 guys, the security detail, they had staged an ambush line of about what we estimate anywhere from 12 to 15 individuals facing north. We came up from the south, but a very well-disciplined force. They maintained their position. And, but we, at this point, we had pushed a gunship up overhead, an AC-130 gunship. For those that don't know, it's an amazing Air Force precision platform that has probably saved more lives on the battlefield than any other asset out there. I owe my life to it from numerous nights, not just this night. But the gunship was letting us know. I kept asking them, can you see weapons? Can you see anything? And they said, no, they just appear to be laying there. As we were pushing up, the gunship said, hey, if right now where you're walking, you're going to miss them. They said, you need to turn to the northeast, turn to, about, 45 degrees. So we did. Unfortunately, 3 members of our team did not. So suddenly we were separated, and it created a pretty dangerous situation. We made the decision to push out to the flanks, and then we were going to come back up on the northern open side of the field, link back up, and then push in to grab these guys and question them. Right about the time we were doing that, the last part of our team literally stepped on an enemy fighter that was laying in a fighting position, engaged him. The rest of us were out on the northeast corner of this field, which was directly in line with their ambush line, and the whole world opened up. So 2 PKM machine guns, which is a very large belt-fed weapon with bullets about the size of my thumb, and then multiple AK-47 shooters. So our medic was initially hit, took a PKM round right below the knee, which pretty much severed almost both bones, dropped him right into the ground. One of our other guys ran forward to grab our medic, got stitched up the body. I started shooting and was yelling, which I think attracted their attention to turn both machine guns on me, which I was stitched across the body armor. I took 2 rounds in the left elbow, which I thought shot my arm off. I was taking rounds off my helmet, had my left night vision tube shot off. I was taking rounds off my gun, and realized we were in a really bad situation, and turned to try and see if there was anything to try and protect me from bullets. And the only thing, there was a tractor tire about 15 yards behind me, kind of a big John Deere style tractor, and everything else was pretty much thousands of yards of empty Iraqi desert. And the house was, I don't know, probably 100 yards away, 125 yards away off to my, from where I was standing, off to the northwest. So when I turned, it was at that point, the guys had fallen back to that tire. I was still out front about 15 yards. I laid down some more fire, and I got up to try and run to the tire. And it was at that point that I caught a machine gun round in the face. It hit me right in front of my ear, traveled through my face, exited the right side of my nose, blew out my right cheekbone, took off most of my nose. Bullet traveled right under my eye, blew out my orbital floor, broke all the bones above my eye. Broke the head of my jaw, shattered my jaw to my chin, and knocked me out. And the guy saw me fall and thought I was dead. To this day, we don't know how long I was out, somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. I'll be honest, I don't remember that. There was no stream of consciousness where I woke up and was like, wow, I've been out.
Right.
It literally, in my mind, as a matter of fact, I was adamant in the hospital that I never lost consciousness. It was only later when the guys got back that I found out I had drifted in and out. But when I came to, I literally was laying flat on my back and the gunfight was happening directly over me. I was watching tracer fire travel about 8 inches over me and quickly realized I was in a bad, in a really bad position. But I also knew there was nothing I could do. I knew I just had to be patient and wait for the guys to hopefully win this fight. I thought my arm had been shot off. When I reached over to feel my arm, what I didn't know is it was kind of pinned under my body, but I had no feeling in my arm. So when I was reaching, I couldn't feel and I had no feeling. So I thought, great, my arm's been shot off. I've been shot in the face. You know, if you don't do something quickly, you know, you're going to bleed out. I was trying to get my tourniquet on. I wasn't able to do that for a myriad of reasons. And finally, you know, we go through a lot of, you know, trauma medicine and inventory and special operations units. You know, I knew I was recognizing all the signs, you know, my body was shutting down. I was going into shock. I couldn't feel my extremities anymore. Every breath was becoming more of a, I just felt like I was running a race and could get no breath. I mean, it's just harder and harder to breathe. And I think for the first time I came to grips with, you know, this may be it, you know, you may be going out. And I'll be honest, that made me angry. I was angry that I had allowed myself to get in this position and I had allowed our guys to get in this position. And I was angry to think that the enemy may get the satisfaction in knowing they killed me. That made me angry also. But then my thoughts, you know, moved to my family. I was married with 3 young kids. My son was 8, my daughter was 5, and my youngest was 2. She hadn't quite turned 3 yet. And that is really what started to occupy my mind, and that I was not going to be able to go home, and I wouldn't see them again. And that was hard. And so anyways, I said, I got to go home. I got to figure out a way. So I called out to God and I said, hey, I need strength to go home. I need it. And amazingly, instantly, I felt this energy, this power. And I went from not being able to move a muscle to however much longer that occurred to getting up. 2 things happened. 1, I had that energy. And 2, this thought popped into my head. And the thought was this: you've got to stay awake to stay alive. And it brought me back to this show that I had watched. I don't know if you guys ever remember watching the show Baghdad ER.
No.
So Baghdad ER was a show that was on in like 2004 timeframe, and they followed medical trauma professionals in the combat support hospitals. And I remember, I'll never forget the statistic they gave that if wounded warriors showed up with a pulse, they had a 90% chance of making it home. That's how good our trauma doctors were. And I remember that gave me a lot of solace to know, oh man, you know, if we get wounded, you got a pretty high chance of making it home. And that thought popped into my head laying there. So it was like, stay awake, stay alive. And that strength. So finally, we know that firefight lasts about 40 minutes. We ended up calling the closest fire mission in the entire Iraq war. We literally called fire directly on our position. The gunship had to deny it the first 2 times. Not, you know, they just said, we'll kill you. You guys are so close. I mean, there's no way we can not hit you. They did some unique things. My team leader, who was our JTAC, and the gunship communicated. It actually changed a lot of the way that we do things on the battlefield because of this. But what they did enabled us to get out of there alive, to take the enemy out, enable us to get out alive, to finally bring the medevac in. And when the medevac came in, my team lead came up and he started dragging me, and I was like, oh my God, stop it. That hurts. So I, you know, went from not being able to move to I got up under my own power and said, hey man, grab my arm, grab my helmet, and I'm going to get on that helicopter. Yeah. So went and climbed on the helicopter, and they flew the rotors off, me and my other 2 teammates, and got us home. You know, I'm still here. 96 hours later, found myself in Bethesda Naval Hospital, starting a whole new journey of getting put back together.
What an incredible story. Couple things come to mind. One, it's going to be hard after my kids listen to this to tell them that TV will never help you in your life. So you watch a show, it saves your life. It's going to be really hard for me to change that. So thanks a lot for that. Appreciate it. There's so much to that story. The faith piece, were you a person of faith before that? Is that something that was a part of your life, or was it at that moment you had clarity that I just can't do this on my own?
Yes and no. So I was raised in a very strong Christian home. If the doors were open in the church, we were there. But what I call it is blind faith. I'm also an incredibly analytical person. I sometimes wonder why God made me the way he did. I think one of my long direct descendants is probably doubting Thomas, because I just really struggle with faith. It's because it's you can't see it. No matter how much you study it,
Sure.
It's just something you have to believe based on, faith. And it was something I really struggled with. So I used to call myself a closet Christian sometimes,
Yeah.
But I will tell you that night, I felt something. I used to pray sometimes and say, hey, Lord, if you could just show me, just give me a sign, just show me something that makes me say you exist. And I often speak in churches about this. Be careful what you wish for. Because, I've often asked, how come in biblical times, especially in the New Testament, you see all the miracles. And nowadays we don't see the miracles. But the reality is we do. We just choose to ignore them. We choose to discount them. And I'm a walking miracle. From the amount of blood I lost, doctors told me it's a miracle I survived. And I know that I was ready to go. I mean, I had nothing left when I asked him for help, and suddenly, to go from having nothing left. And literally, I remember I tried to move my right hand, which was not shot, and I couldn't feel it, So yeah, that gave me, that gave me a little clarity. And, I'd love to tell people that since that happened, oh my God, I've never, ever had an issue with faith. I mean, the reality is I'm human and I'm made the way I am, but it is a journey. Faith is a journey, and it is a journey you always have to continue to work on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, in the Bible it talks about faith as something that has both evidence and substance, and we think that it is this ethereal, close your eyes, jump out, and hope it all works out kind of thing, but God asks us to trust him, but he does provide evidence. There is a reason to trust him, and you're right, you pray for those moments, and God is really interested in having a relationship with you, and he'll reveal himself.
Yeah, don't do it my way. Don't do it my way. I don't recommend that way. This whole getting all shot up, and it sucks. But thank you, Lord.
Crazy. Yeah, it's great. You went to the Naval Hospital, and I read in your bio you put a sign over the door or on the door. And tell me if I'm wrong, but this is what I read on your bio. Attention to all who enter here. If you are coming into this room with sorrow or to feel sorry for my wounds, go elsewhere. The wounds I received, there it is. The wounds I received, I got in a job I love, doing it for people I love, supporting the freedom of a country I deeply love. I am incredibly tough and will make a full recovery. That's incredible. Can you talk about that for a minute? From two perspectives, perhaps. One, a lot of folks suffer a trauma of some kind, and that becomes the reason they're not going to move forward. And you had to decide very, very early on in this journey that was not going to be you. And I think that letter illustrates that.
Attitude is everything, right? And you and I both use, I'm wearing a shirt in honor of you. We both use this get off the X, and I think we both went into combat. You clearly were on the X in that firefight, and you had to at some point get off that X, and I have a story the same. But once we transition back to real life and you're in a hospital, you're in a different X now. You can choose to lay in that hospital bed as a victim and let people enable you the rest of your life and lay in sorrows, or you could get off that X and move forward. And that sign is like the fact that you did that right away, like it's just incredible. So it speaks so much of who you are. It's incredible.
What made you at that moment when you're laying in a bed decide that was what you needed to do?
That's spot on. I mean, And so there were a series of things. And once again, God works in mysterious ways. I had come through an interesting point in my life. Um, my first book, The Trident, is all about this journey, and it is a journey of leadership, because I had made some big mistakes as a young leader, as a young officer. I was an enlisted guy, became an officer, got a little arrogant, thought a little too highly of my own skills, and stumbled, made some mistakes, and almost got myself kicked out of the SEAL teams. Not because I had made mistakes. I mean, if I had just owned my mistakes and drove forward, I mean, people in the military, we're not mistake free. But it's, are you willing to learn from them and be humble as we drive forward? And I wasn't. I was pushing against it pretty hard, which caused many members of the guys around me to say, hey, man, this guy's dangerous. He's going to get somebody killed. And so much so that I had, like I said, I had made a bad call on a mission, fought against it, and really spiraled down. Thankfully, I had some leaders that believed in me and said, hey, we're going to humble this guy. And they did some unique things. One of those things, sending me to U.S. Army Ranger School, which gave me really exactly what I needed, which was some time to really come to grips with who I was, both my strengths and my weaknesses, to recognize that I wasn't as great as I thought I was, and that, there was a lot of things in my leadership that were lacking. So it started this whole new journey. And I'll be honest, it was one of the hardest journeys I've ever walked, because when you guys know, being in the military, your tactical and operational reputation is everything. Because guys are depending on you to stay alive. They want to know that you have their best interest, the mission, the men, and that you're going to make good tactical and operational decisions based off the best of the knowledge you had, that it's not about you. And I had guys that were like, I don't want to work with that guy again. So it took years for me to slowly earn back the trust and credibility and respect of my teammates. All of that kind of culminated with that Iraq deployment. So here I was, I got my career back on track. I'm getting ready to screen for the next level SEAL team, and, had achieved the next level, commander position, platoon commander position. And of course, then I get wounded. So the funny thing is, when I was laying in that hospital bed, when all that was happening, I will admit it was hard at first. There was probably about a week that I really struggled to figure out, where do I go? My career's over. I'm going to be disfigured and disabled. What do I do? And all of that came to a head when I had somebody in the room that basically had a conversation with somebody else. They were standing off the side of my bed while I had some doctors speaking to me. And they started talking about, what a shame, what a pity. We send these young men and women off to war. They come home broken and battered. They're never going to be the same. And I remember when they left, thinking to myself, man, is that it? Like, is this me? This my future? And it's exactly what Chad talked about. Did you buy into the victim mentality? Which, the interesting thing is, I had walked that victim road once before. Because when I got myself in trouble as a leader, I painted myself as the victim. Oh, I'm being thrown under the bus. People just don't like me. And it took a long time to figure out it was my fault. I was the one that put myself on that X. So when I laid in that hospital bed thinking about that, I was like, well, I refuse to sit on this X. I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to feel sorry for myself. And I think, one of the most powerful things that people have is you have a choice. You have a choice on how to deal with adversity. You can lay there and feel sorry for yourself, or you can take charge of your own destiny, your own destination. I love the poem Invictus. The last two lines, I'm the captain of my fate. I'm the master of my soul. And you choose to drive forward. And that's what I chose in that moment. And that's how that sign came to be. It really, there wasn't any thought that came into it. It wasn't something that I mulled over for days. My wife came back into the room, and I just said, never again am I going to, allow somebody else to have pity for me. And we wrote it out. I wrote it out in one shot, and we put it on the door, and it just took on a life of its own after that. I mean, to this day, millions of people have been motivated and inspired by that sign. I don't have the original. President Bush, I got invited to the White House, and President Bush signed the original, and it's now framed and hangs in the Wounded Ward at Bethesda, at Walter Reed for the Wounded Warriors. So it's been pretty, even Wounded Warriors now reach out to me and say, hey man, I saw your sign. Thank you. People with cancer, people in accidents. It's been amazing the impact it's had, all because of one choice: to get off that X and to drive forward and choose positivity over negativity.
Is there a digital file? I'm sure people listening will want to see it. Is there a digital file somewhere online that people could find it?
Yeah, it's, yeah, if you go to my website, getoffx.com, we actually sell copies of it for people. So you can definitely look at that file there. You can see it. I mean, there's plenty that's been written about it. So
I think one of the things I love about that is you said in there, the wounds I received, I got in a job I love, doing it for people I love, supporting the freedom of a country I deeply love. I feel personally like a lot of veterans who accept the victim mentality, they put their arms around that, they never step back and get the perspective on why they were doing that thing in the first place. And if you're not willing to step back and say, you know what, I got hurt or this happened to me, but it happened because I was doing a job I love, for people that I love, serving a country that I love, that perspective, it changes the whole conversation and the whole even process of making the decision to move forward.
Absolutely. And I think that's no different. I mean, you know, Bo Chad and I talk about this, get off the X. I mean, I talk about it from I teach a framework called the REACT methodology, you know, how we recognize when you're on the X, evaluate, assess options and outcomes. And that specific thing, having some perspective to take a step back and, you know, look at the whole picture and the fact that you may actually get better out of this. As a matter of fact, most of the wounded warriors I know who embrace the victor mentality versus the victim mentality, almost to a man or woman will say, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It's hard. My life has been permanently changed. Some of them are horrifically disfigured and disabled, but they live amazing, productive, incredible, motivating, and inspiring lives. And I'll say the same thing. I never would have gone down the road that I'm on if this had not happened to me. And it's made me a much better person. You know, I've just learned. I learned one lesson of leadership and one road I went down, and now I've come to learn there's additional levels of leadership. So, yeah, if you're willing to embrace it, there's so much you can learn from it. But some people can't get off that X. They only focus on the pain and the misery. They only focus on what they've lost, the past, not realizing there's a whole new future. They just aren't willing to look that way.
Yeah.
I believe victimhood is essentially not someone that's, when you paint yourself as a victim, you're someone who's painting yourself as someone that won't take responsibility. So victimhood is someone that won't take responsibility. And clearly, you know, you can't take responsibility for getting hurt, but you can take responsibility for how you respond moving forward. And, you know, a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And I think, you know, I mean, obviously you're a great illustration of it, but what would you say for people that are listening? Because, you know, at Mighty Oaks, we deal with a lot of people that would say are wounded veterans, but not physically wounded. And I don't mean to be insulting to people that were physically wounded, but there's a lot of people diagnosed with PTSD, dealing with anxiety, panic attacks, just restlessness, daily battle with wanting to take their own life. And I mean, essentially they're wounded, not physically, spiritually. I would say spiritually. Personally, I would say it's a deep soul wound for something they've seen or did or participated in or something they can't reconcile. What would you say to those people who are listening to your story? Because obviously you have an incredible story. I mean, I read your story and I was, you know, just captivated hearing you talk. But they say, well, I didn't get hurt that way. I'm not, you know, I didn't get a physical injury. So that just drives them deeper because they feel like they don't recognize because they didn't get hurt that way. They didn't get physically wounded, but they still feel like they're struggling the same way.
Yeah, you and I both know that the mental and the emotional and the spiritual wounds are usually the much deeper and harder ones. You know, the physical wounds you can recover from. I mean, you may not grow a limb back, you may not, you know, grow disfigured skin back, but you learn how to deal with it. You learn how to overcome it. You learn how to, you know, I can't bend my arm any further than this or extend it any further, and I still have some nerve damage, but I have learned how to work around this. This is healed, you know, for all intents and purposes. This, unfortunately, oftentimes you may not completely heal them. You learn how to deal with them. You learn how to work with it. And the problem is for so many people that have invisible wounds or emotional, mental wounds is they think they can manage it on their own. And usually the number one strategy that wounded warriors use that I've watched is they try and bottle it up and just ignore it. Jimmy Hatch is a fellow SEAL that wrote a great book called Touching the Dragon. And I thought Jimmy did one of the best jobs in describing this. He basically said, you know, when you've witnessed something or you've been a part of trauma, you know, on the battlefield, you see things that, you know, you only see in movies, and there's a big difference when there are sights and smells and you are seeing the aftermath of what actually happens in war. And especially if it involves a friend or it involves a teammate or it involves women and children. These are the things that are the scars that are really hard to, these are the emotional and the mental scars that are hard to get past. So what we do is we just try and bottle it up. Jimmy describes it as a dragon. It is a dragon that you now have been exposed to, and it now lives in your mind. And so many of our guys try and box this dragon up. Let me chain it up and put it in a box. I'm gonna stick it in the back room of the closet of my mind, and I'm just gonna pretend it's not there. I'm not gonna talk about it, but the reality is it's always there. That dragon is roaring inside your mind. It's shaking inside that box. And every now and then when the anxiety and the stress gets loud enough and there's a trigger, it breaks out of that box and it starts to eat you alive.
Yeah.
And that's what I think so many don't understand. You guys know the power of sharing your story. And the more you communicate about it, the more you own it instead of it owning you. And Jimmy calls this touching the dragon, learning how to touch that dragon. You got to be careful. Dragon can still eat you, but if you learn to live with it, if you learn to touch it, if you learn how to manage it and tame it, it becomes a part of you. You'll never fully get rid of it. So that's my advice to the guys and gals that are out there. Usually for PTSD, there is no 100% cure. And the other thing is everybody's different. Everybody has, the path that I took may not be the same path that you're going to have to take. But the good news is there's a whole bunch of different paths. You just gotta go after them. And you may have to realize that path you just took, even though it was hard, it may not be the answer. So now you got to go down another path. But out there, the more you do, the more you learn, and the more you learn to manage those mental and emotional demons, and you learn how to manage that dragon. So that's my advice. If you suffer from mental or emotional scars, don't ever tell yourself, well, I don't have these physical wounds that some other wounded warrior has, so I'm ashamed to talk about it. I'll tell you right now, man, those mental and emotional wounds are much more difficult to navigate than the physical ones. And I know a lot of horrifically wounded guys and gals.
Yeah, they would say the same. Yeah, you said something very powerful in there that I think is important to just point out. You talked about never, not doing it alone. In fact, Mighty Oaks, one of our mantras, never fight alone. And in circumstances like you were in, you had your freaking jaw blown off. Like you couldn't fix yourself. You needed help. You had to get help. You didn't have a choice. And but I think a lot of times when people are dealing with emotional trauma or spiritual trauma or these things, they don't recognize the same way. They don't have to go to a doctor to get fixed, and they realize that they think it's something different. But just the same, you can't fix it yourself. You can't do it alone. We're never meant or created to do it alone, and we have to be in community. We have to be around the right people, and it's an important point to recognize. And that so many people, to their own detriment, and sadly to the detriment of 20 plus a day, try to do it alone. And we just can't. We just have to keep pounding the message out there that, guys, you don't have to do it alone. Jason did get better and get back on his feet the way he did by himself. Someone helped stand him up off the battlefield, put him on a helicopter, and doctors and people came alongside of him to get him back put together. And no different with those emotional and spiritual wounds.
Absolutely.
Jason, what's with your family, with your wife and your kids, what's the process been like with them? I mean, you came home to a new life, and they came to the hospital to a new dad and husband, and I'm sure it's been a process for them. What does that look like with a family trying to recover from something like this?
I'm really fortunate. I am in my book, Overcome, I'm really fortunate because I speak on 5 different areas called the Pentagon of Peak Performance. And the 4th area is social leadership, the top area being spiritual leadership. But social leadership is the people you surround yourself and investing in those people. And I had made that really long journey of, pulling myself out of the dark hole of leadership failure and coming back. My wife is amazing. She is, I call her my rock. I call her the long-haired admiral, because she is a leader. She is a warrior. She is resilient. And man, she never batted an eye with everything that happened. And her and I both agreed that, we needed to set a positive front for our kids. And I think this is a critical thing, because, and I don't want to ever tell any wounded warrior out there or anybody that's ever gone through trauma, everybody has to walk their own journey. But when you are sitting on the X and you're focused on your pain and misery and what you've lost, it's really hard to look outward. It's kind of like you're in a firefight and you're taking all this fire and all you're focused on is this little scope of the world. I think all of us that have been in combat, we understand this idea of, you got to let the battlefield develop. And sometimes you got to be able to step back to see a perspective of everything that's going on. And I think my wife and I realized that I could lay there and feel sorry for myself, but what was that going to do for my kids? My kids were young. And the other thing that my kids taught me real quickly, I was really afraid of this because, I looked really mangled in the beginning. I've had miraculous doctors who put my face back together. I've had a miraculous recovery. And I remember thinking, oh my God, my kids are going to be afraid of me. I'm a monster. And they weren't. They in the beginning, they were kind of like, daddy looks a little funny, but at the end of the day, they figured out, oh, daddy's still daddy. And they taught me the definition of unconditional love. My wife did too. And I realized, well, man, I owe it to them to, like, dude, you can't just lay here and feel sorry for yourself, man. You got to get up. You got to help with homework. You got to, you got to take them to school, even though you may look funny right now, because that's what they're going to remember. And they're going to learn that despite having bad things happen, the world didn't come to a grinding halt. Like the world still goes on. So we followed that example. And I think it unequivocally made a difference in the lives of my kids. Believe it or not, this year, my youngest turns 16, my middle turns 18, and my oldest turns 21. And they're good kids, man. They're grounded and they're resilient. And, we've had the typical teenage snafus here and there, flexing their wings. But other than that, they're really good kids. And I attribute that back to never acting like, oh my God, this is the end of the world with what happened to us. It was like, hey, daddy was a SEAL, and one of the byproducts of that is sometimes we get shot. And you know what? They're going to put me back together, and we're going to stay positive and drive forward. And I think my kids have that mindset also now.
What is, you've used the word resilient a few times. Resiliency is something we talk about a lot, something Chad talks about often to the active duty community, and we've had the chance to do that. What does resilience mean to you? What does it mean to be resilient? What does that look like? And how do you develop that?
So so when I talk about resilience, I call it the overcome mindset. Overcome is my word, is what I stand for. It's what I believe in. I believe it is the single most critical thing for any of the successes I have. That's what it comes down to. And I define it, overcome as a simple word that says, I will never let adversity defeat me. And the important thing for people to understand when you talk about the overcome mindset of resilience is it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get to the outcome you think you should be getting to. It doesn't guarantee that, if you're paralyzed, that someday you'll walk again. Sure. It doesn't guarantee that, if you were injured and you're non-operational, that you'll get back operational someday, or that you'll be able to do this or do that. But what it is, it's your ability to get off that X, drive forward, and continue to make forward progress. And you start to figure out that, well, this is the path. This is the door that I open. And sometimes it may be 90 degrees away from where you originally thought you were going. But resilience, or the overcome mindset, it enables you to get there. I describe it, another way I describe it to people is what I like to call the breacher mindset. So we teach our breachers that no matter what happens, no matter what obstacles in their path, they're going to get through it. And, we give them all this amazing training. We teach them how to use, lock picks and sledgehammers. And, we teach them how to cut through walls with chainsaws and exothermic torches and use explosives. But the reality is none of that matters. We don't care. I don't care how you get to the other side, over it, under it, around it, or through it. just get to the other side. And that really is the essence of an overcome mindset of resilience. It is understanding that no matter what happens, I'm going to figure out a way to the other side. And the other side may not be what you think it's going to be, but you still get there. You go through that journey and you figure out, okay, this is the outcome. I couldn't see it in the moment. It's kind of like being in a storm. In a storm, you can't see what's on the other side, but you keep driving forward. And someday, somewhere out there, the sun's still shining.
Yeah.
And you get to it.
That's awesome. Man, that's great. There's nothing to add there. That's powerful, man. That's wonderful. That's good. Resiliency is something we talk about all the time. And that predecision to have the overcome mindset or to have that attitude of resiliency, it's absolutely essential. And so many people, they miss that. Somewhere along the way, they miss it. And the storm comes, the trial comes, the trauma comes. They hit the ground and they just never get back up because they haven't thought ahead of time of what that looks like. Yeah, powerful.
One of the things Jason said earlier was about the power of sharing your story.
Yeah.
And I know for me, like, I never had a desire to do any public speaking at all. I feel like kind of got thrusted into it because of the work we do at Mighty Oaks. But I could say from a personal perspective, it's been incredibly healing for me to bring value to the struggles I've experienced in my life, and really just to see how it impacts other people. And I know you get out there, you've written 2 amazing books. You're out there speaking. How's that impacted you personally as speaking, and what are you hearing back from other people as you speak as they relate to your story, not like especially non-combat veterans?
No, it's been amazing, Chad. Thanks. I know you got to feel the same way. I mean, to go through some sort of traumatic experience and then turn it into something positive that other people can use, because it's life's hard, man. All of us are going to go through hard moments. I mean, when we say the struggle is real, I mean, it is a part of being human. I think God made us this way, that you're going to have highs and lows, and you're going to have hard moments, and you're going to have easier moments in your life. But how you navigate through those harder moments makes the difference. And that's everything that I speak about. So it has been amazing to be able to speak to companies, individuals, teams, organizations about that. And my goal is always, Lord, can I impact one person, just one person here that I will make a difference for them? And usually 99% of the time, someone will come up to me or they'll write me on social media after the talk and they'll say, oh my God, I can't tell you how much I needed that. I'm going through this massive life ambush right now. And I didn't know where to go, but that, understanding that just driving forward, just figuring out a way forward, I needed that. And that's been pretty amazing. It makes me feel like, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm paying this forward. I feel that, we lost a lot of teammates and guys that were much better operators than I was. And I'm like, why did I get to come home and they didn't, So I feel like it's on me to make sure I'm making the most of this, like to be paying it forward, to be positive, to try and lift other people up, to set a good example, because they don't get that chance. And I think their families would give anything to have them back. So I try to tell that to other guys and gals that are out there, man. The greatest way you can pay tribute to the guys and gals that are no longer here is by spreading positivity, by helping. That's honoring their name. You're not helping anything by laying there and, self-medicating or focusing on the past. What you can do is focus on the future. And that's what I try and do. And it's been pretty neat to be able to do that.
That's awesome. I agree with you.
With your books, Jason, can you kind of give us a snapshot of each one and who should be reading them? And maybe it's everybody, but there's probably someone you were aiming it at when you wrote it. Tell us about those, and then tell us how to get those.
Yeah, so The Trident was the first book, and it's just it's my memoir. It's the story of a young kid that came in the military, and like many young kids, I see this in high-level sports also. You achieve this level of success at a very young age. I mean, to be a SEAL or a special operations commando, there's a lot of prestige that goes with that. And even there's a lot of, here we are where these young 20-something-year-old kids that are given massive responsibility. You're in charge of millions of dollars in assets, some of the best trained operators on the planet, going off and doing strategic level missions. At times I think it's easy to get a little enamored with yourself, and I did, and stumbled and fell. And the book follows that journey. It's that story, of failure, and then, awareness, and then redemption, and then to be severely injured right after that, and then figuring out that there's another level of leadership. It also follows the journey of my wife and I from when we met to my military career, and how she was such an amazing rock. And I think, the power of a relationship is a big thing. And it's a great tribute to many of the military spouses that are out there who have been through everything that we've been through. Overcome is second book, and Overcome is kind of the I don't know, it's almost the sequel to the Trident, because everybody would reach out to me over the years and say, how did you do that? Your story is amazing. How did you stay so positive? How did you drive forward after everything that happened to you? You failed and all your guys said, leave. And how did you keep driving forward? When you were severely injured, the doctors told you, they needed to amputate your arm and you were never going to be able to do this or that. How did you do that? And I'll be honest, I used to always just say, well, it's the Overcome mindset. I just kept driving forward, but people wanted more than that. They wanted a step-by-step process. So over years of speaking and writing content, that's really what Overcome came to be. It's the how-to to the Trident. And I'm fortunate that I interviewed a lot of high-level, notable military leaders from, Admiral Bill McRaven, Stan McChrystal, Admiral Eric Olson, Mark Devine, Jocko, and they all contribute to some of the concepts I talk about in the book. This Get Off the X concept, the REACT methodology, my Pentagon of Peak Performance, and how you can lead yourself. One of the biggest things is, I think, effective leadership. I break it down into 3 rules: lead yourself, lead others, lead always. And if you can do that, you're better prepared for the life ambushes are coming for all of us. Right now, somewhere out there on the horizon, for Jeremy, for Chad, for Jason Redman, there's a life ambush waiting for us. It could be tomorrow. It could be 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now. It doesn't matter. It's out there. And having a mindset of preparation, a mindset of leadership, of leading always, enables you to better handle it when it comes, instead of how most people run their lives, which is they're just running blind and they're not ready for anything. And then when it hits them, it just absolutely destroys them. It takes them so long to get up and move forward, if they ever move forward, because I don't know, I think they thought that that'll never happen to me.
Yeah.
But it's not true. So that's what Overcome is about. It's been getting great feedback. I tell you, during this COVID crisis, it's been pretty neat to have so many people reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for writing that. It has made all the difference for me while we're going through this.
Yeah, it's awesome. How can people follow you on social media or wherever you want them to go? And where can they get the books?
Yeah, so you can follow me. My website is jasonredman.com. So that kind of takes you everywhere. It takes you to all my social media. Jason Redman WW is my handle. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, I'm on there under Jason Redman. And if you click on the store link and jasonredman.com, it takes you to my other website, getoffx.com. And that's where my online store is, and you can get signed copies of the book.
Yeah, awesome, man. Fantastic. Man, we tried to get this a couple times. Chad and I, our schedules don't always sync, and we were scheduled once and didn't work out, but super stoked it came together. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you guys, and for what you're doing, obviously. And I know Chad and I are talking about we got a faith-based initiative that's coming up here in the near future. So we're working on all that. But
yeah, that's so much. I mean, I'd love to work with you. There's so much that I believe we could do together. We're just so like-minded. I'm just thankful our paths crossed.
Yeah.
Likewise, man. Absolutely. Both you guys, Chad, both you guys and Chad. Thanks, man.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you. And for those of you that are watching, thank you for watching. If you are listening somewhere other than YouTube, thank you for listening. And go over to YouTube. Check out our channel. We've got a lot of great content there. Subscribe. Go ahead and hit the notification bell. You can like the content, share it out. That helps us. And more than anything, it helps those who receive it. So please do that. And we'd love to hear back from you. Thank you, and we'll talk to you next time.